This now is the second part of confession, or the office of the keys. Let me share my screen with you. Okay, so in the first part, we heard about it from the side of the leaders or the pastors of the church. Now we're going to hear it from the side of the sinners. I don't mean to suggest that pastors aren't sinners. Of course we are. So this applies to also us in our private lives as people, not in our public roles or offices as pastor. So, in fact, I would say pastors should do this first before anyone else does, to give them the authority to forgive or not forgive sins in their public role. Anyway, so the question now is, what is confession? Now, you may have heard about confession. People who come from a Catholic background or a Catholic environment are more likely to be familiar with it, or maybe if you have seen movies that feature Catholic figures, confession is a very popular motif in films because it seems very dramatic. You have somebody go to the little booth and knock on the door, and there's the priest you can't really see on the other side, and the person maybe tells a terrible secret that nobody else knows about. That is one way that confession can be done. It is still very common in Catholic churches. Orthodox churches have confession too. But actually, you might be surprised to learn, also Lutherans and other kinds of Protestants are certainly allowed to do confession. The main difference is that we tend not to say that it's required or that you have to go to confession before you can go to the Lord's Supper. And I think that's probably a good idea not to make that requirements. That's a pretty Lutheran thing to say. On the other hand, the downside is that by not making it requirements, by and large, Protestants just never do it at all. That can be good or bad, but especially if you have something weighing on your heart or something that you just can't fix in your life, it can be a great comfort to be able to go to a pastor or to any trusted Christian in your life and actually confess to them as if to God, so you actually get a direct voice responding to you. Of course, you can and you should always confess in your private prayers, but sometimes things are so serious, you really need to talk to someone and hear them respond back to you. So that's what we're talking about here. This is the kind of confession, not that you do privately on your own, which should be a regular part of your life, but when you go to another person asking them to hear your confession and to absolve or forgive you. So here's the explanation. Confession includes two components. First, confessing your sins and guilt. Second, receiving forgiveness from your confessor as though from God himself. Not doubting, but firmly believing that your sins are forgiven by God in heaven. So you see, this is quite similar to what we heard about in Holy Communion, that you need to believe the words for you, that God intends this to be for you. So when you go to confession, you should certainly go it in order to confess your sins and guilt, get it off your chest, what's bothering you. But you should also go to confession expecting to receive forgiveness from God himself through your confessor. Don't doubt it, but believe it, that God intends to forgive your sins and is happy that you have gone to confess. Next up is the third part.